Life, it comes at us like a train with all its ups and downs, its pains and its joys. How do we deal with it? How do we process it? How how do what we learn from life, and especially what we teach life back in return, makes all of the difference. Welcome to Life Talks. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Life Talks. I'm really excited because of my guest today, but just a little preview or refreshing of where we've been. I did mention in the last episode that I took a little break just for some self care, and I wasn't quite sure how to re emerge back into this space because coronavirus had kind of gotten in the back of our minds, and we had emerged into uh, racial wars, I would say, and the awakeness or reawareness of the social injustices that are happening in the Black community. And so I was really praying on how to still be impactful and relevant with this show. But I'm grateful to say that I have a guest on here who was supposed to come on the last show, but I believe that his expertise can speak to whatever situation that we're in, just based on his current title. And so I'm really pleased to introduce you to Dr. Paul Anderson, who is not just a mentor of mine and a father figure, but he is also the director for Adventist Chaplaincy Ministries at the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventists at the headquarters in Maryland. In Columbia, Maryland. Chaplain Anderson served for 20 years as a U.S. Navy chaplain, over 26 years of active duty. He was promoted through the ranks from seaman, apprentice, E2, to his final rank as Commander 05 in the Chaplains Corps. Prior to his naval career, Chaplain Anderson pastored in the Allegheny East and Potomac Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. His undergraduate preparation for ministry was completed at Columbia Union College, which is WAU right now, in Tacoma Park, Maryland. He has subsequently earned 4 graduate degrees, a Master's of Divinity from Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, a Master of Education in Counseling and Personal Services from the University of Maryland in College Park, Maryland, and a Master's of Sacred Theology in Religion and Culture from Boston University. His Doctor of Ministry degree was conferred by Wesley Theological Seminary in Washington, D.C. Chaplain Anderson also completed 4 units of clinical pastoral education at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. He also holds certifications in suicide awareness and prevention, civil mediation, alternative workplace dispute resolution, temperament analysis, marriage enrichment, workforce diversity, and is a certified life coach. Dr. Anderson, thank you for coming onto the show and welcome to Live Talks.
Well, thank you, Latoya. I hope all that didn't put your audience to sleep.
Actually, it woke me up because I knew that you obviously had quite a bit of training and skills in your pocket, but you are fully loaded and armed to handle pretty much, seems like anything life throws at you and those who you serve. And I think this is so fitting for us to talk about crises and crises management and the role of chaplains in our world right now. I know that when I asked you first to come on, it was COVID, and we were going to talk about the role of chaplaincy and chaplains in in COVID. And as we saw in the news, there was more news emerging about the importance of social workers and psychologists, psychiatrists, and chaplains to help people maneuver through the grief and the trauma and anxiety that COVID was presenting to us. But then we end up having all these killings of Blacks and the nation just turning inward with anxiety, with grief, and the same expressions of our heart. And so, can we talk about both today? Can we tiptoe on both because we're still in both?
Sure. The COVID-19 pandemic is, because it's still going on and maybe even burgeoning. It is something that none of us have ever lived through before. We experienced the initial shock about the looming and approaching illness that could kill millions, we thought at first. So far in this country, not quite 200,000, but they're predicting that it will exceed 200,000 and millions of people who've been infected. The good news is, though, there have been many more people who have gone to the hospital and survived than those that went and died. But the dying was what was newsworthy. So that's what was foisted upon us like a heavy burden on our shoulders. And then the isolation. Couldn't go to work, many people, and we had to stay home with our families. Well, every family has stuff.
Right.
And some of the stuff wears on us regularly. Imagine when you can't get away from the stress points in your life. So many people had to find ways to cope, and it opened up new avenues of communication and depth in relationship for those who could survive. In other cases, the isolation of the pandemic has caused some erosion in family circumstances. But then there's joy. And in the midst of all of this, there have been people who, even if they were afraid of the danger, moved ahead to care for others in the midst of the crisis. Many of them, many of the unsung heroes, were the chaplains. There was a lot of focus on the ER docs and the ER nurses and the critical care people and the ICU people because of the enormous pressure they were under. But the unsung figures were the chaplains who were there in the hospitals at peril to themselves, doing what they'd always done, which is to move through the staff members and the patients and the family members and seek to bring peace, some amount of comfort, and some forward-looking perspectives as a part of their role as chaplain.
So you're absolutely correct. I love the way that you mentioned stuff, and you made it clear that we all are dealing with stressors. I saw many unfortunate news reports of domestic violence increasing during the isolation, of suicides also. Even within the medical responders, there were individuals who just could not handle, unfortunately, what they saw. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was just the overwhelming burden of just ICU units being filled to capacity, not having enough, whether it's ventilators or protective clothing, and just seeing people die. You know, we can handle so much, and we're getting the news as it's filtered to us. These medical personnel were right there seeing people die daily with numbers that maybe they hadn't seen in a long time. And I would say that includes chaplains also who are in the hospitals, tending to both the medical personnel and the families. I could imagine that being overwhelming. However, this is what you are trained for, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So how has being a chaplain or the chaplains on the front lines been able to um, be impactful in the lives of those they have served?
So, as an administrator, I'm not on those front lines of patient care where I was in decades gone by, but I have talked to some of the chaplains who are directly involved in patient care in some of the hardest hit places, New York, Florida, and even one chaplain and another person who was stuck on a cruise ship because they couldn't get off because the countries would not let them um,
Orders.
board
Orders.
and debark from the ship.
Mhm.
So I've talked to some of them, and they've shared some stories with me about their experiences with others. And I think the one thing that is primarily effective that chaplains in all those situations have employed is the non anxious presence.
Mhm.
Oftentimes in the military chaplaincy, it would be shared that chaplains make a difference upon arrival. And it's been seen many times in healthcare institutions where, especially in emergency departments and ICUs where people are dying, if there's a code going on, they'll call for the chaplain. And almost invariably, in my experience, and I've heard others say so too, there's a certain thing when the people who are dynamically working on an actively dying patient know that the chaplain is there. The
Mhm.
chaplain doesn't get to say anything, doesn't touch the patient, but being there and praying for the people and the family members is a calming, effective experience. And that's one of the things that the chaplains have brought to bear. I talked to some folk whose daughter got sick, didn't have COVID, but because of the COVID restrictions on hospitals, if you were over 18 and were a patient, you couldn't have a family member go in with you. They drop you at the door of the emergency department, but couldn't go in because they were not the patient. And it was out of an abundance of caution. But the chaplains at several hospitals that I've talked to would find out the new patients in the ER. Where's your family? Oh, they're out on the parking lot. Chaplains would go out on the parking lot and look for the parents of this patient or the husband of that patient and say, I just saw them and they asked me to deliver this message. Or I have the hospital iPad here. Let's call your family member so that you can see and talk to him or her. Those Some of those stories will bring tears to your eyes,
Right.
but it was their presence and their non-anxious projection of calm that was often effective. Can't answer all of the philosophical questions, the why me's, why him, why her, why now, but could be there to listen and to click emotionally, spiritually, and join with people where they were. That's the gift and the genius of chaplaincy.
Wow. And that was so beautifully said. I actually put myself in the shoes of a parent, being a parent myself, or just a family member, and that would make a difference. Not feeling so alone and helpless.
Mhm.
Um, so we may not understand how powerful the ministry of presence is, but a chaplain in a situation like that would remind us that not walking a dark road alone makes all of the difference.
Mhm.
So, as director of the chaplaincy department through the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventists, you cover, or your department covers, hospital chaplaincy and military chaplaincy, or all chaplaincies, correct?
All
All levels of
chaplaincies.
chaplaincies.
We endorse chaplains for healthcare, military, campus, corrections, police, fire, and community chaplains.
So, what would be if there is an individual who has seen the ministry of presence and how impactful it is and feels a calling to become a chaplain in any of those branches, as part of your interaction with them, we know that are in the administrative role, but if you had to speak to them on one of your trips, um, what would you say to this person in their decision making process that will help them maneuver through which branch would fit best for them?
Mm. Well, we are fond of saying all chaplains are pastors. Not all pastors are called to be chaplains. So fundamentally, a person would want to have and develop a pastoral identity, part of which is professional and academic training and preparation. To be an endorsed Seventh day Adventist chaplain, our NAD working policy requires that they have at least a Master of Divinity degree or equivalent. And the equivalency is not just the number of credit hours. That masters should have a minimum of 72 credit hours, and then at least 2 years of pastoral experience before applying for endorsement. That's important because chaplaincy is pastoral ministry plus. And so we want our chaplains, people who are endorsed as chaplains, to be mature, to have strong pastoral identities, to be developed and experienced leaders, spiritual leaders who have stories of their successes and their struggles, and who can apply introspection to their own experiences and figure out how to mine positive and meaningful professional and personal honing from good experiences as well as some that are more trying.
Okay. Now we talked about the transition or the shared space that COVID and the cry of racism and social injustices has right now in our country. We're in the United States of America. Um, Chaplains now, are they just as important in serving the communities and people now as we are grappling with uh, we're hearing killings, we're seeing killings live, and we're grieving. There's a collective grief right now that we have as a nation. So it's not just the deaths, not just the killings, but having to grapple with our emotions, our anger, our frustration, um, and questioning where we are and trying to get healing. How can chaplains help? Is it the same, mirroring the same ministry of presence, or is there something else that a trained chaplain can give to a community or a family in this time of, I would say, civil unrest also?
Well, now that's a good and broad and deep question all at the same time. Yes, we are all in shock, um, awed, disgusted, grieving, while at the same time feeling driven to do something and to hold on to things that have transcendent meaning. We're all struggling, but the chaplains who are trained and taught and experienced in some of the arts of being self-possessed know that You can only be calm when you know who you are and whose you are inside. Otherwise, um, we would be as frenetic as the most frenetic person that you've seen on television about some of the atrocities that have happened. And the atrocities not just being George Floyd being killed on the street or any of the other kinds of atrocities that have happened, but this confusion of peaceful protests and marauders who will hijack a peaceful protest and try to turn it into a riot, where instead of points being made, property is being damaged and people are being injured. And we have to know how to draw the difference between doing right and good and having that same sense of rightness, and righteousness hijacked by people with evil intent who want to um, damage things and break things and burn things out of their frustration, which may or may not be real.
So you mentioned having a good awareness of who you are on the on the inside, and this might be, you can process how this question would sound. Um, I'm wondering of the strength of that awareness, or how strong that would be, and I'm guessing that comes with training of a chaplain having to grapple with their own emotions, of how they feel about what they're seeing, and having to process that first, before dealing or helping a family. If they're, I'm just thinking, if there was a chaplain that was with the Floyd family,
Mhm.
having to first intake those images, process it through their feelings, whether it hopefully then triggers something, or if they had an experience through it. It just seems like there's so much that a chaplain would have to um, shed off
Mhm.
before coming to stand in a rightful way or rightful presence with that family. Is that why it's so important that chaplains go through all of the training that is asked of them, and not to skip any or try to skip any, or try to think that they can go ahead and just do it without that specific training?
Yeah, if you're not careful, you can step on emotional minefields in yourself or trigger explosions in other people. And so chaplains are trained to assess themselves first. What did you see? How do you feel about what you saw? Why do you feel that way? What informs the decision or the perspective that informs those feelings? And it's very important that individuals um, in, inquire of how they feel and then interrogate the feelings. Because many times the feelings that we have currently are not always based upon what just happened, but more likely they're based upon things that happened to us before and how we learned to cope with and move on from those experiences. So our in the now response may not be totally related to what just happened, but be connected to things that happened a long time ago.
Okay.
So questioning your feelings. And then once you've assessed that clearly, then you might ask yourself, well, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do now about whatever the situation is? Dot, dot, dot. So what can I do? What can I do now? And how can I make a difference in this situation? And the answers may not come immediately or quickly, but they will come once they've been launched into your interiority. And the better you know yourself, who was it that said the unexamined life is not worth living?
Mm.
So once we know who we are and we're grounded and rooted in that, and we've learned how to ask some pivotal questions of ourselves, then we may, in due season, calmly ask some of those same questions to people who've been traumatized.
Yeah. I think the beauty of what of that, or the fruit, the beautiful fruit of that, is for those of the rest of us or the community or who they serve who may not have been blessed with those skills. That ministry of presence and whatever they leave is almost like a gift to the family, or an introduction to some of these coping skills and coping mechanisms, if we pay attention to that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, and so it seems like it's a shared space of gifting and giving, receiving and giving back, giving a calm to the family, but also gifting them with a way to process through their grief. If the chaplain is not there through another crisis, they may remember what that particular chaplain did for them
Mhm.
during that time. It sounds like a sacred work. I should say it is a sacred work. Um, do we need more chaplains in our communities?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just as there are not enough pews in a given community for all the souls that need to be addressed and find salvation, there are not enough chaplains to reach out and touch people in the community in meaningfully non-threatening ways. Um, but chaplaincy, there is the professional side of chaplaincy. And then there is that part of chaplaincy that's just personally adding value to people's lives. More times than not, our interactions with people are merely us glancing at each other at the intersections of our lives. Is there still just one light in Berrien Springs at that four-way?
Traffic light?
Mhm.
No, we have progressed. We have one, two. We have two.
Oh, awesome!
We've
100%.
gone up one. Yes.
Yeah. Um, but you know how at that main intersection, there's that four-way flashing
The
red
gas
light
station.
there.
Uh,
And you get there and you stop and you look around. You look at that intersection, that road, this road, the one in front of you. And more times than not, we don't remember the cars that we saw, but we see enough to know that it's safe.
mhm.
And occasionally, when school is in session, there will be a school crossing guard to help children cross the street safely. Chaplains have intersectional relationships with many of the people that they meet, especially in the healthcare situation. But beyond that, in other environments and experiences, it's not just the intersection of life during crisis or recovery that you might experience in a hospital. In other brands of fields of chaplaincy, it's more like a journey. So there will be that point of intersection where people meet. But in hospice care or maybe campus chaplains where you'll see people multiple times, you're not just intersecting and passing them by, you're journeying with them and watching them grow as they go.
Yeah, that's a beautiful visual. I probably won't look at that traffic light the same again whenever I hit it. Let's talk a little bit about male and females chaplains. Obviously, we are in a productive era where women have been able to access more professional avenues and education that were exclusively for men um, in times past, not too long ago. How important is it that we have a balance of both females and males within the chaplaincy? Do each of them bring their unique um, presence to situations? And can we become lopsided if we have too many of one uh, sex within the chaplaincy?
Good question. And yes, chaplaincy is a very fertile professional field for women in ministry. The Adventist Chaplaincy Ministry Department currently has about 720 endorsed chaplains across North America. About 10% of them, maybe a little bit more, are women, and we welcome them. And if it gets to 50% or 51%, to God be the glory. There are no gender barriers on chaplaincy ministry. In fact, I believe in women in ministry so much so that I wanted to demonstrate that on a trip recently, a couple of years ago. ACM sponsored a trip to Israel, and we took 30 people, and among them were several female chaplains. We knew we were going to the Jordan River, and since I'm as big as I am, I asked one of the female chaplains who was just a bit shorter than I am, who looked like she might have been able to handle it, to baptize me
Baptize you.
in the Jordan River.
Okay.
And there were people taking videos of it. Obviously, we didn't have any cameras because we're in the water. But immediately after we came out of the water, someone showed me a video of this young woman baptizing me in the Jordan River, and she takes me under and she brings me up, and we're standing there wet, and a cloud moved, and you can see this beam of light, and right as that light, I mean, this cone of light is enveloping us, two white birds fly behind us,
Wow.
and the frame stops with the birds right behind us.
Wow.
So I say of that, God must have been well pleased.
Yeah.
Um, Women in ministry are welcome in Adventist chaplaincy ministries.
Yeah. Awesome. 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 I'm so grateful for the time that you have taken out of your busy schedule to speak to us. I really hope that if anybody is interested or has been praying about it, or God has impressed on your mind to think about chaplaincy, that this conversation has given a little bit more clarity. I know we didn't cover everything where chaplains are concerned, but at least you know that at the helm of this chaplaincy program is a man who believes in all chaplaincy and the ministry of presence and the impact that a chaplain can have in the lives of the community. I don't see this crisis that we're in being averted anytime soon. It seems like we're just being enveloped. If it's not one, it's another. And especially now, Dr. Anderson, when we have to grapple as a society with the unemployment that we have faced because of COVID-19, the loss of jobs, families being sick, people still recovering from the after effects of COVID. COVID is still rising in some states like Florida and in Texas. Plus having to deal with everything else, loss of property, riots, deaths, and so forth. So, wow, what a time to really appreciate the presence of chaplains and to thank them for doing this hard work. and also to pray for them as they filter through what they're seeing and what they are doing. Um, what can we do to support a chaplain that we know?
Chaplains are people too.
Mhm.
They need family, they need stimulation, appreciation, and inclusion. Most of them are multi-talented, some are multilingual. They're all pastors, fundamentally. So as they come to your church, embrace them, involve them, include them, ask what they do and how whether or not they enjoy what they do, and to tell you some stories, because every chaplain has what I call Emmanuel moments, moments where the presence of God was thick in an interaction, whether in a hospital room or a hospice or walking across a campus or something like that. We all have stories and we're all pretty good storytellers. Ask us to tell you one of our stories.
Okay. Thank you so much. I would like to, in advance, invite you back so that we can
Anytime.
dialogue some more. I really, really appreciate your time. And for you, just know that our prayers are with you as you and your department um, care for the chaplains through the program, and that whoever encounters you will get to see and meet this amazing man that I know, and see your heart as a chaplain, for people. So thank you so much. Take care. Keep safe. Any last words that you would like to share?
Sure. If you're watching this from somewhere other than Berrien Springs, I want you to know that there are chaplains in every state of the union. And I have 4 assistant directors who cover regions of the country. So if you're in the West Coast, California, from south to north, and all of the Pacific Union, the assistant director for Adventist Chaplaincy Ministries out there is Ivan Omanya. His email address is ivanomanya@nadadventist.org. If you're coming east from the West Coast into the Plains states, from Texas to Montana, and Wyoming, and all the way out to Wisconsin or Minnesota, that would be Bill Cork. His email address is williamcork@nadadventist.org. Going south, from Louisiana over to the Atlantic Ocean, the assistant director is Washington Johnson, and his email address is the same, washingtonjohnson@nadadventist.org. From the mid-Atlantic seaboard up to Nova Scotia, my assistant director is Gilda Roddy, and her email address is m.gilda, Gilda, Roddy, Roddy, @nadadventist.org. We're here to help your dreams of being a practicing Adventist pastor who became a chaplain. We can help make that happen. Just give us a call or email us, and we'll be back in touch to answer any questions.
Thank you. And as Dr. Anderson was given those emails, you saw it scrolling at the bottom, and I will also leave it on a slide at the end, including the number for the office.
Yes, our office number is 443-391-7247.
247. And if by then you guys are back in the office, they can always call the division headquarters and ask the receptionist at the front to redirect you or transfer you to the chaplaincy department. So we'll get everything on the screen. Everything will be up there. You're welcome. All right. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day. And I look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you, LaToya. You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Including the number for the office.
Yes, our office number is 443-391-7247. What is my number?
It will be up. I'll put it up.
Edit.
You've been out of the office for a little while now, being quarantined, but
No, I got it now. 443-391-7247.
247. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Life Talks. I hope that you were inspired and that you have felt a rejuvenation in your life. And I hope that what you are saying right now is that the answer that you are given to what life has thrown at you is that I am still here. Email us with your Life Talk ideas at mylifetalkstv@gmail.com. See you next time. Bye.